Welcome to Life by Design, where Dr. Alex Tam interviews real estate investors, delving into their experiences and insights. Get ready to uncover the secrets behind successful real estate investing and discover how it can shape your life.
Last 10 years of my career, I was working with C-level executives, more as a consultant or a project manager for large implementation plans. And it gave me exposure to that entrepreneur space, which I'd always been fascinated with. So those skills that you've acquired and the income that you've acquired and the capital that you required will just parlay into your real estate investing career. Those are kind of the main ones: my expertise, better returns, and then ultimately it's the relationship, because people buy from, do business with trust. People they know, like, and trust. We'll try to become more and more professional. My goal is to look like, a Fortune 100 company from the outside, and provide the type of services that can provide as well.
Hey, we have a really special guest. His name is Randy Smith. He started off working as W-2 for over 20 years, being a high performer in his work, then realized the power of real estate and is now helping other high power professionals, salespeople work on investing as a passive investor in real estate. You got to hear him out. His story is phenomenal, where he got from where he was to where he is now. Here we go. Well, thank you everyone for coming into the Life by Design podcast. We have Randy Smith today, and his life is really interesting on how he was working corporate for many years, and now he spends his days helping other professionals invest in real estate. Instead of me taking over and telling your story, Randy, let's talk about how you really got started in real estate to where you are right now. Give us some details.
Yeah. So as you mentioned, I was in corporate America for about 25 years, and I was a sales and sales leadership guy, carrying the bag, as they say, out there, just meeting with tons and tons of clients. I had a lot of windshield time, as they call it. So I drove from client to client for a lot of years. And I started, listening to podcasts and books and trying to continually grow in professional development, personal development stuff, and came across real estate investing. And that really kind of planted the seed that would eventually turn into full-time real estate investing, call it, 6, 7, 8 years later, and maybe even longer. I sat on the sidelines for quite a while, and I ended up buying a bunch of single-family homes out of state, and then found pretty quickly that I was more interested in going bigger, faster, and wanted to be a little more passive, and that's how I found the passive investing space.
What type of W-2 work were you into?
Yeah, so I worked for a large financial services organization. I worked, Fortune 100 organization for the last 10 years. Okay. Prior to that, it was a Fortune 200 environmental services company. And it was the last 10 years of my career, I was working with C-level executives, more as a consultant or a project manager for large implementation plans. And it gave me exposure to that entrepreneur space, which I'd always been fascinated with. So it was a really great role. Loved my time in corporate America, would not change that for anything. But it was time to move on by the time I did.
When you first started in single family, and a lot of people started in single family, when they go from working at W-2, they're like, okay, let me rent out the first home that I bought now that I bought my second home.
Yeah.
Do you recommend others kind of trial and error on single family home before dialing into multifamily? What is your take on that?
Yeah, I think it's unique to the individual. I don't think there's one set answer for anyone. I think the individual really has to take a look and take a kind of a stock of their inventory. Like, where are their resources? Do they have time resources? Do they have financial resources? Do they have skills that they can apply? And really just matching those with either an active or a passive strategy is the best way. So for myself, I was a sales guy. I had, as Dave Ramsey would say, I had a very big shovel because I was making very, very high W-2 income. But I also had quite a bit of autonomy because I had worked from home for 10 years and I was a performer. So the bosses didn't didn't keep too close of an eye on me, so I had a lot of
Right.
flexibility. So I thought that was the perfect opportunity to use the spare time I had with the extra dollars that I was accumulating to do a little bit more of an active role. And for myself, what I found is at some point the fact that it really was not passive income at all. It was really very active.
It's quite active, right?
It is very, very active. Yeah, you get this idea where, I update some spreadsheets, maybe an hour a month. That just doesn't happen with single families. So it was very, very active. And I found that when I took a look at my dollar per hour earnings, every hour I was spending on the real estate business really was kicking into, I was in the $250 to $300 per hour range. So it was pretty hard to match that in the real estate space. So I think everybody just really has to take a look at where do they have resources that they can leverage for this, and then make sure they match that to the appropriate strategy.
Absolutely. Now, when you transition from single family into multifamily, what was the biggest shocker that you realized, at the beginning? Like, whoa, I didn't expect this. Were there some challenges that came up?
Yeah, I think for me, I had been listening to podcasts for years at this point and read a number of books, and I had this idea that I don't know how you say it. I didn't realize how big of organizations were required to run successful syndication businesses. Now, we all
the
know
amount of people that
amount
it
of
takes?
people, amount of resources, amount of hours. A lot of people present it as if, you go to some Weekend Guru event and you meet a couple of buddies, and next thing you know, you're buying thousands of units. And in my experience, that's not it at all. The people that I like to work with and I like to passively invest with actually have fairly large organizations with employees, and they're fully integrated, so they're controlling as much of that as possible. And they truly are experts. These guys are working 40, 50, 60 hours a week, far more than I wanted to put into it. And I just found out real quickly I probably didn't want to be a syndicator either, because these guys, although the financial upside was huge, the amount of hard work and expertise and dedication and hours that they were putting into it was more than what I wanted to do, at least initially. So,
and I bet it takes away from family time, as well. And how has your life been different now that you're working as full-time passive real estate, but not really passive? You're helping others get into real estate versus when you were a W-2. Does your family see you more now? Do they see you less? What's that dynamic like?
Yeah, it's interesting. In our household is a little bit unique. My daughter actually lives out of state with her mom, so there's not our family unit here in Arizona is my wife and I, and we're both entrepreneurs. So we're probably actually working more today than we were when we were in our W-2s. But it's a different type of environment. If you love, and I hate the cliche, if you love what you do and you never work another day in your life. I work quite often, but there's a passion there and excitement and energy that I didn't have when I was in corporate America. So family life today looks a little bit different, but it's more like we've brought these hobbies into income producing activities, which really kind of shifts it just shifts the mindset, it shifts the energy, it shifts the perspective and everything with it. So a little bit different than some folks who get into the space to try to free up their time so they can spend many, many more hours with their families. Ours is a little bit different than that.
Now, I didn't know that your wife was an entrepreneur as well. Does she do the same thing that you do or something similar in real estate?
So when my wife first left her W-2 about 5 years ago, she kind of took the reins in our BRRRR business. We were BRRRing single families in Atlanta, and we had some turnkeys in Kansas City. And it was, it was not a full-time job, but it was definitely a part-time job. So she was able to leave her W-2. She more than replaced her income, like 2x her income, by doing the BRRRR strategy. And it freed her up to actually chase her passions that she had been wanting to go and pursue her whole life. So today she's an author. She's about to be published.
Wow.
She has become a psychotherapist. So she runs a therapist business from home, and she meets with clients over Zoom. And she's really, because of the freedom that financial freedom and time freedom that real estate investing has given us, it's allowed her to pursue those dreams she's always wanted to pursue. So it's really been absolutely amazing. But now we went from dual income, high income, to dual entrepreneur. Very, very different world than it was even just 2 years ago. So,
Yeah, but it's given you a lot more freedom, and it's giving you an opportunity to do something that you're passionate about.
absolutely.
Right? Now,
Absolutely.
how income-wise, let's just say someone who is trying to leave. Not, here's what I've realized, Randy. You might see the same thing. I see a lot of people who got into their W-2s because they just worked their butt off, went to school for it. It's like, I don't want to waste my degree, but they don't
Yep.
necessarily enjoy it,
Sure.
right? And some of them at the beginning, they're like, well, Alex, if I went into real estate full time, I might have to take a pay cut, right? And there's that problem.
Yeah.
How would you suggest someone transition into it?
Mm-hmm.
Some people are like, I just want to cut the chains.
Burn the boats, right?
Burn the boats.
Yeah.
Well, what is your take on that?
Yeah, so I like my real estate journey started 5 years before I left the W-2.
Right.
So by the time I left halfway through last year, and I actually made more money last year than I did the year prior. Okay. Now, there was a lot of different things that played into that, but I think people that make the decision to jump into real estate to try to have time freedom and financial freedom, they need to start that process while they're in their W-2. And what I find, and I heard this recently, like if you're running from your W-2, that is very, very different than running to real estate investing. And I think it's important to look at that. Like generally, like if you're miserable in your W-2, you're probably going to be miserable in real estate investing. Like how you do anything is how you do everything. And you're going to bring that into the new space as well. So, I think first and foremost, people need to be very, very good at what they do in their W-2 and work hard and become experts in that field. And then the transition will relate to this new real estate investing world where those skills that you've acquired and the income that you've acquired and the capital that you've acquired will just parlay into your real estate investing career. So if you've not performed at a high level in a W-2, it's not likely you're going to jump and perform very high level very quickly in real estate investing. It's just my opinion.
Right.
And that might offend some people, but my experience shows that top performers are top performers throughout their lives.
No matter what they do.
Exactly. And you're probably not going to go from a low performer in a W-2 to multi-millionaire in real estate just because you make that transition. So,
Right. Now, thank you for sharing that, by the way.
yeah.
And when you look at the roles in real estate, you mentioned, well, syndication was definitely not something that, as a syndicator I wanted to do. And how did you choose what you're doing right now?
Yeah, so it's funny. I kind of just fell into it. I knew when I left the W-2 that I wanted to do something more, something bigger, impact more people, essentially. And so I didn't actually officially leave my job by choice. I got laid off in May of last year. So, I'd been in sales and sales leadership for 25 years. That naturally translated to kind of a consultant role with helping educate and inspire new passive investors. So that the skill sets translated and transferred very well there. Now, when I left, I had this plan where I had set a 5-year goal that I was going to leave corporate America and move into real estate about 3 years prior to getting laid off. So the layoff probably sped things up by a couple of months is what I think happened. But I still didn't know what it was I wanted to do. I was passive investing very aggressively at the time. I think I was in 15 or 18 different deals at the time. A large portion of our monthly expenses were covered by our passive income. So It really gave me some freedom to kind of take some time and figure out what I was going to do. And
Right.
I ultimately just ended up, I talked to and got on the phone with as many mentors and people that I was close to that really knew who I was. And it became very clear in having those conversations that I could take my training and education passion over to this space and essentially create the business that I created. And I had a partner that I had invested with pretty heavily that believed in me enough to give me an opportunity to partner with him, and found out within just a couple of weeks that there was something there. And that ultimately is how Impact Equity was born. So,
Wow, that's exciting. That's exciting.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of times when you fall into it and it's organic, those are the best opportunities there is.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah. But I think it's also important too is that so essentially I'm a capital raiser. I help bring dollars to investment opportunities is what I do through my network and advertising and marketing. And, I think there is this tendency in this space where people will kind of push you in the direction towards the thing that they need as well. So just by just human nature, I think. So there was probably a little bit of that combined with my experience, combined with what my network needed, and that ultimately is how it landed where I'm at currently.
Right, right. Explain to me, when you are a capital raiser, right?
Yeah.
You are raising for different opportunities. What is the difference between a passive investor going directly to the operator versus say, hey, Randy, let me invest with you? Like, what's the difference?
Yeah. Well, so a couple of things, really. Like, operators like to work with me because they want to leverage my network. Like, they don't have access to my network, so they need guys like me to broaden their network, essentially. So that's the value. It also is not, it's a difficult task to do. Like, it's highly labor intensive. There's a lot of phone calls. There's a lot of education. There's social media. It is a full-time business bringing investors into the business. And some operators, their superpower is operations, asset management, acquisition, and they just don't want to deal with investor relations or bringing capital into the deal. So they, like anything, you find partners that are experts in certain areas and you come together to form the most powerful group. So from the investor standpoint, why do they work with a guy like me? The reason is that essentially my superpower that I have continued to refine and improve over the last X amount of years is I'm getting very, very good at vetting deals and vetting operators and vetting opportunities. So an investor can work with someone like me and leverage my skill and expertise of finding good deals so they can focus on their W-2 job where they're making as much money as they possibly can, trust on a source like myself that they know, like, and trust, and then by the nature of what I do, I'm generally bringing much bigger checks to an operator. So I'm going to get better terms than traditional retail investors would get if they went directly to that operator. So those are kind of the main ones: my expertise, better returns, and then ultimately it's the relationship, because people buy from, do business with, trust people they know, like, and trust.
Right. That's huge. And I think a lot of people need to understand that is when they go out and invest 50, 100,000, they're not getting the same service as if they're investing with you directly.
Yep.
Because you vet the people already. You've already done the legwork for them. A lot of people are just going in blind, right? But when you have already done it, you've been doing it for years as a passive investor, and you understand the whole ecosystem, it makes a huge difference.
And, I think it's important too. Like, my very first passive investment, I wrote a check. I invested in the guy because I listened to his podcast for years. So I assumed that since he was a large brand, that he was going to be a good steward of my dollar, my dollars. that is actually proven to be true, and it was a good investment, but it really was very lucky that turned out the way that it did. When I first started investing, I didn't know if I was a growth investor or a cash flow investor. I didn't know that I could invest with different types of cash and self-directed accounts. I didn't know the tax implications. I just knew that this seemed exciting. I knew it was real estate. I knew I wanted to get in it. And there's a saying that I like to use sometimes. It's like, if you go to a barbershop, odds are you're going to get your hair cut. So if you go to a salesperson that is selling XYZ, their goal is to sell you XYZ. It's not necessarily to sell you what's right for you. Right. So by me having access to a lot of different operators and a lot of different deals, I can truly get to know somebody and know what they're really trying to do with their dollars and make sure that they're putting their dollars in the right spot. And probably one thing that I see more than anything is that a lot of operators, if you go to them and say, hey, I've got $100,000 I want to invest, they'll say, thank you. I've got surprise, surprise, I've got a perfect deal today. Here it is, invest your 100 grand. Whereas I'm going to say, if you got 100 grand, let's spread that across 4 deals. Let's put it with a couple of different operators. Let's spread it across different asset classes, and let's look at some different geographies where we can put your dollars. So you get true diversification, even though you're writing bigger checks and you're doing it in private placement real estate. So I think to have an advocate in your corner helping you with that, at least until you get trained and educated enough to know how and where to put those dollars, I think it's really critical.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Where does the future lay for you, Randy? What does the next 3 to 5 years look like?
Yeah, so I would love to tell you what I think the next 3 to 5 years will look like, but what I've learned in the last year, or actually in the last couple of years, is that I get a really good idea of where I think I'm going to go, and then something changes, and we have to readjust and change direction and strategy. So what I will share with you is the goal of impact equity is to help provide that diversification that I shared with you. Right now, I currently have 3 partners that I work with 2 asset classes, and my ultimate goal is to probably have 4 or 5 partners in maybe 3 or 4 different asset classes. So to really have premium, top, world-class operators in multiple asset classes to provide that diversification. I have no doubt that if the trend continues, I will continue to hire more and more resources. I'll continue to invest in the business. We'll try to become more and more professional. My goal is to look like, a Fortune 100 company from the outside, and provide the type of services that can provide as well. But ultimately, I think what will happen is I'll get more and more involved on the active side again, and bring my expertise and due diligence to the table with some other partners. And, over time, the goal is passive income and decrease my dependence on the W-2 even more and more and more, just like I'm trying to help my investors do.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Now, there's passive investors and active investors out there. What's the best way, Randy, for them to reach out to you?
Yeah, so I have a website, impactequity.net. I do have a free giveaway on the lower left-hand corner. It's the Sales Professional's Guide to Passive Investing in Real Estate, because that is the avatar, high-income W-2 sales guys. I do spend a ton of time on LinkedIn as well. So LinkedIn, Randy Smith, pretty easy to find out there.
Awesome. Well, Randy, thank you so much for your time today, sharing your expertise in what you do. And we wish you all the best.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Tam. I appreciate being on the show. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you. Have a great day now. For those of you who like to hear more stories of Randy, click here, and I hope his story inspires you. Reach out to him. All right? We'll see you next time.